Okay, so welcome to week 11 IP Law. This is our last week of our regular Zoom sessions. Tonight really was just going to be a question and answer session. Luckily enough, there is one person who can ask questions if she so desires. But first, I just wanted to reiterate some points that I made in the drop-in session about the second piece of assessment that you have for this unit, and that is, of course, your 40% written paper. The first thing I wanted to note for you was that you have already nominated for me your topic, and so therefore I will expect you to be adhering to your nomination that you made earlier on in the term. If you did wish to tweak either of those standard assessment questions, then I needed you to get back to me much before today. So the only people that have decided to take on a slightly different topic are Angie, Caitlin, Joselito. So they are, and Jacob, I think is, no, Jacob's doing a standard topic. So I've recorded your decisions on which topic you wanted to do. And of course, if you haven't looked at the topic, I would strongly suggest that you do it very, very soon. If you're looking at, trying to formulate a good thesis, I would heartily recommend that you have a look at that video by Scott Beattie at the top of my Moodle page. That's a really good set of tips in relation to good assessment writing. I have noticed from your first piece of assessment that some people were really struggling with just how to structure an assessment piece that is not in your typical IRAC form. It seems to me that there are a number of you guys that are used to the usual problem scenario question that's posed for you, given a set of facts like we had during the term with Nigel and Roy, and then you're asked several questions in relation to the legal position of the parties. This kind of writing is very, very different to IRAC writing, and it is a skill that you will need, not just for law school, but more importantly for your career. It is the basis on which, you will be able to do things like write a convincing memo to your partner after you've done your research. It is the basis for things like providing written advice to clients. This kind of writing is extremely important for you to kind of get your head around. So it's not a frivolous exercise by any stretch of the imagination. And if you are somewhat new to the process of non-IRAC writing, there are plenty of resources out on the internet for you to go and have a look at. What I might suggest, and I'll just share my screen now, is going to have a look at the excellent resources available at, as you can see there, Monash, the Monash University website. I'll just go back one page here. Here we go. So I've looked here, skills for writing in law, you can see there, Monash University. And if you go into it, it gives you a number of different topics that you can have a look at. And if you go over to the left-hand side there, you can see it kind of teases apart the various different things that you need to think about. Okay, so skills for writing in law. If you want to look at, for example, the analytical component of what you need to talk about, then it's got a section on analysis, and each one of these links open up to give you more information about what you should be doing for that particular facet of your written work. Okay, so I would highly recommend going and having a little poke about, but this is quite a good little resource. And if you go into the tabulated links, you can see it gives you a number of little quizzes as you go through to test your understanding of what is actually required. So it's a bit interactive, a little bit different, and I think it's quite useful. So, but as I said in the drop-in session, you know, at its most basic, first of all, and in fact, I've had some Zoom sessions this week, and you know, people have been saying, you know, where do I start? The most critical place to start from with this particular piece of assessment is your own understanding of the fundamentals of that particular area of IP law. So if what you're going to be talking about for me is, for example, if it's looking at the whole issue of inventive step for patentability, because the Productivity Commission, you know, whinge about the whole level of our tests for inventive step. And this would be for topic 2. Obviously, you're not going to start by looking around the net for information on inventive step or a critique of inventive step or the tests of inventive step. What you need to be absolutely rock solid on first, before you do anything else of a critical nature, of an analytical nature, is you need to really understand what a patent is, how you go about getting one, and how those elements of patentability in Section 18 all fit together first, before you can then logically go and hone in on one of those elements in Section 18, namely inventive step, drill down and then examine the tests, examine what the Productivity Commission has said about those tests, and then make up your own mind. It's not much point starting with the Productivity Commission report if you haven't first got it straight in your head. What is a patent? Why do I need these tests in Section 18? Okay, similarly, if you're talking about copyright, for example, and fair use, there's no point looking about on the internet for all the different critiques of the fair use doctrine. You're going to have to go back to copyright law first. You're going to have to understand the fundamentals of copyright law first before you can then jump into something like the Productivity Commission report and their recommendations, and then you can go about undertaking your research to augment your particular thesis on whether or not that particular form is acceptable or warranted. So, because I have had some people getting a little bit confused by the plethora of material that's out there on the internet. And there is a lot of material out there because IP is such a hot topic. It's a little easy to get confused and lose your way if you don't have that rock solid understanding of that particular area of IP law first, okay? So the logical kind of stepping off point is get your fundamentals squared away first, because your analysis is not going to mean anything if you really don't understand what you're critiquing. Okay, so there's top tip number one. Top tip number two, well, I guess it's not really top if it's number two, is make sure that you have a well-structured introduction, body, and conclusion. Okay, now a little bit like what I said for the previous tip, there's no point in starting to structure your work unless you have first got yourself a thesis. You need to know what you will be arguing for and the arguments you will be making, because that information should be right up the front there in your introduction. Okay, some of the first pieces of assessment read a little bit like a mystery novel for me. I was left to find out as the piece unfolded what things were all about, what exactly the arguments you were making, what position you were taking. And in fact, I actually had some people changing their position midway through their assessment. Okay, that's not acceptable. You need to argue what you've said you're going to argue in your introduction, pull it through the body, and whack it in there again for your conclusion. Okay, so introduction, body, conclusion. Have a little look at the web page that I've suggested if you're still unclear about exactly how you should be making your arguments in the body. Okay, but that's the best, I guess, advice that I can give you in relation to structure. In relation to footnoting, and I know I do tend to harp on about this a little bit, but I was surprised in the first piece of assessment where people did not adhere to the Australian Guide for Legal Citation. And I have that here. It's at the University of Melbourne website, as you can see there. Particularly, I picked up from your first piece of assessment, people just did not know how to cite internet materials. Okay, I had everything from just a hyperlink on its own. no heading, no author, no nothing, through to everything bells and whistles plus, you know, a little bit more. So make sure, and internet materials is 6.15 of the AGLC. It's on page 116. So hi Vanessa. So if you're uncertain about how to cite internet materials, go straight to page 116 and it's there for you in all its glory. You do need the little carrots, okay, front and back. That is just the way things stand for the time being. I know it's a little bit kind of outdated. That's the way the internet kind of started, didn't it? In its infancy, we had the little carrots in front and behind the hyperlink. That's just a bit of a hangover from early days, but nevertheless, it is still a requirement of the AGLC style. So we need to make sure that we have them in there. And we need to make sure that if you go down, look at this, punctuation. A footnote is not just a throwaway comment. You know, this is a formal piece of writing and we need to make sure that we pay attention to things like grammar, okay, which includes punctuation. Another tip for you is that in quite a number of assignments, I found that people just hadn't even bothered to spell check. And I had some fairly spectacular spelling errors. In fact, I even had one made up word. So please run a spell check for me, because if I'm marking at 2 o'clock in the morning, it really does help if I can decipher what it is that you have written for me. Apart from those practical tips, I guess the most important thing is to it harks back to my point about your thesis. Make sure that it is tightly formulated in your mind. You should be able to write your thesis on a small post-it note. And if you have it that tightly focused, then you should be able to state it in your introduction very clearly, very succinctly, and you should be able to pull that idea through the body of your work with relatively little difficulty. It does take a bit of time to formulate your thesis in a way that you feel happy with, but it's really worth just sitting down and playing with it until you're happy, because once you've got a really nice, tight thesis in mind, that will almost drive your writing. Okay, your whole task of writing will seem that much easier, believe me, if you actually know what it is that you're going to be arguing. They're my practical tips. Is there any queries from you guys that are here with me in relation to the practicalities of things? No, you're all pretty happy with the way things are going? All right. How are you finding and how are you getting along with formulating your thesis and stating your thesis? You guys both have that all in hand, pretty much? Yes?
Somewhat. I've kind of got the concept of where I'm going, but I haven't kind of put a fancy name on it yet, if that makes sense.
That does absolutely make sense. So if you're at that stage, then I guess my advice would stand, which is, do spend that time just formulating your ideas. Get a scribble pad out and just try and knock a thesis into shape that you feel happy with. And then, like I said, I think you'll find that tends to drive a lot of what you actually want to say. The whole task of writing is much more simple if you have an idea in mind of a thesis that you want to get across. The other thing too to bear in mind, and this is particularly for those people that are kind of out there not with us this evening and hopefully puddling about on the internet trying to find more pearls of wisdom. There will be a time where you need to say to yourself, okay, this is enough now. I need to start writing, and hopefully that'll be well before the night before it's due. But I think it's useful to research enough such that you feel happy enough to formulate your thesis. But once you've got your thesis formulated and you've started writing, you actually may find that your opinion refines itself, and you might find yourself wanting to go away and do more research. I would say to that, if you know pretty much what it is that you're looking for, then go for it. But don't let it become an endless exercise where your task of going about researching for more stuff gets in the way of you actually putting pen to paper, okay? There can be a trap of endlessly expanding your literature review, okay? You need to, at some point, get down to the tin tacks of starting to write. Now, like I said, if you find that there are gaps in your support network, then sure, go ahead and look for support where you need it in your arguments. But don't get trapped into that whole research thing where you're just endlessly researching and not getting the words on paper. I mean, it is only a 2,000 worder. You're not looking at a master's thesis of 15,000. You're certainly not looking at a PhD of 80,000. Mine was close to 100. So, you know, you need to get that pen on paper or those, you know, get to the keyboard and start tippy-tapping away. The other thing is, whilst editing is a good thing, if you're doing so much research that you possibly could end up with a 15,000 word paper, that's probably not a good thing. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be editing down from 5,000 words to a 2,000 word paper. You want to be roughly arriving at 2,000 in your rough draft. You might be, 1,000 over, you might be 500 over. But you don't want to be so far over that you just can't edit the thing down. I have had in the past assignments which just the student must have just refused to edit down and just handed in that 4,000 or 5,000 word paper. At which point I have to start drawing a line underneath, 2,200 odd words and just not reading the rest. Okay. So I guess the danger in writing and writing and writing till you've got 5,000 is that, you can become so attached to the thing that it's just so hard to take out an entire section, and you find yourself kind of shuffling things about and kind of endlessly reworking things to kind of manage the thing down. So I would suggest, like I said in the drop-in session, I would suggest strongly using headings. Headings are I know that for some of you that have done an arts degree, I did kind of half of an arts degree. I know that in some disciplines, headings are really frowned upon, and it is considered a hallmark of the high caliber of a piece that it doesn't need headings and that one paragraph seamlessly flows into the other. Look, that's not the way law operates. It's certainly not the way business operates. It's not the way clients operate. And given that this unit is a reasonably practical unit, right from the way that we started doing the IRAC kind of stuff in the workshops and looking at practical problems there, through to the nature of the assessments that you're getting at the back end of the unit, it's really important that you start to learn those more business-oriented, practically oriented skills. So headings are great, and you can use them in your planning process. And this is what I do. You first and foremost come across your thesis. So you formulate your thesis, and then you logically think to yourself, well, what are the foundations upon which that thesis relies? There might be 4 arguments that you need to present. So then you're going to be sketching out for yourself, well, what are those 4 headings going to deal with? And then bingo, you've got all of a sudden your assignment has been divided into 4, And you know that if you go too far over about 500 words per section, you're going to be rolling into the problem of endless editing. Okay, so headings aren't just useful for the marker, they're also useful for you guys when you're actually writing and planning your assignment. I think it was Quentin Tarantino. I'm a big Quentin Tarantino fan, movie-wise. And he always says, you know what, you shouldn't be editing down to that standard 90-minute acceptable movie length. You know, you either can get your movie directed as it should be and it somehow arrives at about that point, or you just don't bother. And this is why Kill Bill was divided up into sequels, because he just wouldn't edit the thing down. It ran so far over time that it was logically better to chop it into a number of movies rather than try and get that grand masterpiece down into 90 minutes. This is the same thing I'm saying to you, you know, plan right from the start, and then you won't have dramas, you know, at midnight on the day before you have to hand in, trying to get your 5,000 word piece down to 2,000 words. The other thing that I also said in the drop-in session was use your footnoting well. And by that, I don't mean the technical requirements of citation. I mean, you can, and I encourage this, and I also am encouraging my honours students to do the same. If you wish to augment what you are saying in the body of your assignment, feel free to use the footnotes as a scholarly conversation with me. I'm not scared of a decent footnote. I read each assignment multiple times. Sometimes if they're really hard to understand, I'll read it many times. But, you know, it's useful for me if you feel like, oh, you know, is she going to get that point, or is it a bit is there some ambiguity there? Can I clarify it? Oh, look, my word count is already so high. Pop it into a footnote for me. Obviously, like I said in the drop-in session, if you're going to try and get another 2,000 words into the footnotes, I'm going to have to draw the line somewhere. But I certainly don't mind you using the footnotes as some kind of scholarly conversation with me. That's perfectly acceptable as far as I'm concerned. I don't. Some lecturers take a bit of umbrage with using footnotes that way. Certainly, you know, if you read something like the Harvard Law Review, that's exactly how they use their footnotes. But where there is a tight word limit like this, I certainly don't mind you using the footnotes to have some kind of discussion with me if you think that it will add to the flavour of what you're trying to say in the body of your work. That's probably about it. I'll just throw it open to some questions, and if there's not a whole lot of questions, then we can kind of leave it there. But use this as your opportunity to kind of wring out of me any further snippets of information or top tips that you need. You guys have any queries? No, Jessica's got it all settled. You're done and dusted already, I can tell. Vanessa?
I do, AJ. I just wanted to know if it was all right. I'm doing option 2 for my thesis.
Yep.
I'm focusing on fair use.
Yep.
Wanted to make sure that was fine. So basically, though, I need to tie that into topic 2, don't I? I don't need to come up with reinventing the wheel as far as fair use goes, do I? I stick to the reforms, isn't that right? And I can focus just on fair use.
Yeah, you want to scope it down. Actually, That's a really valuable point. That is a really valuable point, Vanessa. Scope it as tightly as you can. And by scope, I mean, and this is something that, you know, if you end up writing scholarly articles for publication, you know, it's almost as important to to properly scope your article by saying, this is all the things I'm not going to cover, as it is you saying, well, this is my thesis and this is what I am going to cover. You want to narrow things down, because the more you narrow things down, the more you can show your research expertise on that one point. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Instead of using the shotgun approach, it's much harder to demonstrate mastery when you're trying to, for example, give a bit of a Cook's tour of IP. And not that I'm, precluding anyone from doing this. I'm just saying it is a challenging exercise to very convincingly give a portrait of a horizon, what's going on across the whole horizon, than it is to drill down on one particular part of that horizon and then flesh it out with all of your research goodies that you've found. Yeah. So, scope it down as much as you can, because surprisingly that 2,000 word limit will come up quickly.
Yep. And it's very hard position. And then I went through and I was like, oh my goodness, this is huge.
Yes.
So it's a lot easier once you've picked your area to sort of start focusing on which side of the debate you want to go on, so to speak.
Yes. And I actually had someone else ask me something in a related vein, which was, do you have to go through the basics of this area of IP first, and then, and then go, about talking about this particular area, and then go about talk about the reform? Look, you can take it as read that I'm across all of the fundamentals. So don't waste your word count on, I have in the past sometimes I haven't set these assignments before, but something similar. And I have had people wasting large tracts of word count, for example, by citing, the requirements of patentability in section 18, in the body of the work. That's all wasted word count as far as I'm concerned. All you need to do is whack something in the footnotes, section 18, Patents Act 99 and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to know exactly what you mean. You can pick up at the appropriate level of scoping that you need to. So don't waste your time. I'll hark back to my first tip, which was, yes, you need to have that area of law straight in your own mind first before you start writing. But when you're writing, don't waste your word count on telling me that you've now got all of that understanding. Believe you me, it won't take me long before I work out whether you actually understand that area of IP before you start your arguments as to reform. So don't waste your word count on things like that.
So that was, I guess, going to lead me to my next question, which is to assume it's going to be read for an academic audience, so to speak, not.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. And I think the more experience that you have with this, now that we've got the honours program up and running and we have our first cohort going through as we speak, if you do wind up publishing articles, it's a really good skill to have. I know it's a bit pedantic. Oh, and this is the other thing. If you do a really good set of footnotes and it all complies with the AGLC, you don't need to do a bibliography. Okay, that's how it works when you're publishing. So don't worry about the bibliography. That's a waste of your time, my time. If you're following the AGLC, you have all of the information that you need for every point that you've cited right there on the same page. So unless you are publishing for a journal that specifically requires a bibliography, and I have done that once or twice before, you really don't need to bother. Okay. So yes, you can assume this is an academic scholarly audience, and therefore I guess that brings up another thing. Your tone should be formal. It shouldn't be so formal that you have trouble expressing yourself, but I had in some of the first pieces of assessment a lot of informal, I didn't know what to do, well, maybe you might wish to frame that in words that are a little bit more professional. Do you know what I mean? Imagine that this is going to be the basis for quite often in practice, and I did this a number of times, imagine it's going to be the basis for a newsletter, a firm newsletter. Quite often they have articles like this in firm newsletters. So, and they'll often go out in the partner's name in conjunction with your name. And so it's really important to get the tone right. Okay. So in a firm newsletter, you wouldn't be reading things like, I really don't think that this is the best use of IP that could be made. Do you know what I mean? You're going to be stating things in a professional and in an argumentative fashion. So you'll be arguing for one point or another. Okay. That's tone. That's not to say that you can't add, a little spicy bit of humour here and there. I do in my publications. But it just means that you keep things on a relatively professional level. Any other queries of that nature? No. Vanessa, any other issues?
No, all good. Thank you very much, AJ.
All good. Okay, well, as always, I'll stop sharing now. As always, my offer stands, which is, if you need to have a Zoom with me at any point before you hand in, please just drop me an email. We can set up a Zoom. There is absolutely no problem with that. I'm more than happy to discuss your assignment. What I do need you to do is to have some specific questions for me. Because that will make most effective use of our time, our collective time together. And I love this stuff, I live for this stuff. It's great experience for you to bounce your ideas off me. It's good for me to hear where you're going. It's a little bit like when you're told to write that article for the partner for the firm newsletter, and then you have all these ideas floating around in your head and just kind of have some queries and questions, and you pop into the senior associate's office and you just bounce your ideas off them for a minute, and you say, I just wanted to make sure that this was right or that was right, or I just wanted to make sure that this hung together or whatever. And that's fine. I don't mind that at all. What I can't have, which is what happened this week, is someone coming in and saying, I'm confused. And not having any actual specific questions for me. At which point I'm more than likely to answer, well, get some specific questions for me, and then we can move ahead. I mean, in that particular circumstance, it was okay because I ended up teasing out of the student a little bit more about, what they were concerned about, and we could move forward with the discussion. But I can't write the thing for you. I'm more than happy for you guys to use me as a resource, but I can't write the thing for you. I can't make your arguments for you. I can't do your research for you. So, like I said, doors always open, but you need to help me out with making our time effective when you do that. I'm keen to make this a really active learning experience for you. So, like I said, treat it like a law firm scenario. Treat me as your senior associate, and if you do need to bounce ideas off me, let me know. If your internet's not so great, and I know that there's a few of you out there in the cohort this term where your internet is not so great, just email me. it's no problem at all. Or we can do a good old-fashioned telephone exchange. Okay, so that's probably about all from me. Any other parting questions before we go? No. Well, I just wanted to say to everybody, thank you so much for doing IP law with me. We've had some great discussions in the presentation component of the unit. I thought we did. I had some great pieces of assessment for that first piece. So I'm obviously really looking forward to reading your second piece of assessment. Don't forget to do your posts for your group discussion marks, because you'll need to do that before we close off for this term. All of the due dates are in the unit profile. Was there anything else? Oh, yes, there was one other thing. If you haven't already done a unit evaluation for me, can you please do one? I think I only need 2 more. Yay, 2 more before I make my 50%. So for all you guys watching out there, if you haven't done a unit evaluation for me, can you please do so? And that's about it. Yay, end of IP law. Yay to you. It's been a great term for me, and I hope to keep in touch with you guys as you further on, your legal career and, your studies. If you ever want a sounding board or just to keep in touch, like I said, don't hesitate to email me or ask for a Zoom. I'd love to see you in future. Okay, guys, we'll have an early mark, and hopefully I'll see you for honours. Okay, guys, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, AJ. You've been wonderful this semester. Thank you.
No worries, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, AJ.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.